Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of China Update, where we discuss leading political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. And first up, the 25th EU-China summit was held in Beijing on Thursday, yesterday. The event very much reinforced the widening rift between the European Union and the Middle Kingdom. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and European Council President Antonio Costa met with General Secretary Xi Jinping and Premier Li Qiang. With expectations already very low heading into the summit, the limited outcomes appeared to confirm a relationship under increasing strain. While both sides issued a joint climate statement and agreed on a new mechanism aimed at easing bottlenecks in rare earth and permanent magnet exports, the meeting delivered few tangible concessions. Quote, "We agreed, and this is new, to have an upgraded export supply mechanism," end quote, said von der Leyen, noting that the mechanism would allow for the swift resolution of export disruptions. However, she stressed that this agreement should not be interpreted as a removal of China's export restrictions, which have significantly impacted European as well as other industries dependent on critical raw materials. This is an area we've been following very closely over the last month or so. The summit took place against a backdrop of mounting European frustration over China's growing support for Russia. EU officials reiterated concerns that Beijing's economic and technological aid is prolonging the war in Ukraine. Quote, "The EU underlined that this war of aggression is not only an existential threat to Ukraine, but also to global security," end quote, the EU's official press release stated. Chinese officials, however, offered little indication of any shift in stance. As we covered earlier this month, China's top diplomat Wang Yi reportedly told EU officials that it was not in Beijing's strategic interest for the war to end, citing its potential to divide American attention away from Asia and towards Europe. Although Chinese authorities have not publicly confirmed the remarks, the optics have further damaged trust in Europe. Concerns over China's trade practices also dominated the summit. In 2024, EU-China trade totaled 730 billion euros, but the EU's trade deficit with China reached 305 billion euros, a figure that EU leaders described as, quote, "critically unbalanced," end quote. Von der Leyen criticized China's industrial overcapacity in sectors like steel, solar panels, EVs, and batteries, stating that these subsidized surpluses are flooding foreign markets. Quote, "The Chinese leadership has started to look into this issue under the term involution and express willingness to support more the consumption and less the production part," end quote, she said, quote, "but we need to see progress on this issue, because without progress, it would be very difficult for the European Union to maintain its current level of openness," end quote. EU leaders also continue to press China on the issue of dual-use exports aiding Russia. Recent revelations that Russia is deploying decoy drones made entirely from Chinese components and that Chinese-made engines are reaching Russian drone manufacturers have heightened European alarm. UK-based Reuters reports this week that, quote, "Chinese-made engines are being covertly shipped via front companies to state-owned drone manufacturers in Russia, labeled as industrial refrigeration units to avoid detection in the wake of Western sanctions, according to 3 European security officials," end quote. Brussels recently sanctioned 2 Chinese regional banks accused of facilitating transactions that support Russia's war effort. Commentators argue that Beijing now sees Europe not as a partner, but as a vulnerable flank in its strategic rivalry with the US-led West. Quote, "Beijing treats this simply as a moment of vulnerability to exploit," end quote, wrote Andrew Small of the German Marshall Fund, adding, quote, "Any hopes that China might want to establish a more benign Sino-European relationship due to transatlantic tensions were fundamentally misplaced," end quote. The European Chamber of Commerce echoed these concerns, noting that public sentiment in Europe is shifting. Quote, "If very intense pressure from China leads to losses for European companies, then of course it becomes, hang on, why are we doing this?" end quote, said the Chamber President. While the summit may have served as a diplomatic necessity, all it really did was further highlight the erosion of trust and the growing consensus in Brussels that de-risking from China rather than engagement, must now be the EU's top priority. As one European official told the South China Morning Post ahead of the meeting, quote, "The only deliverable is a substantive, open, direct, good, constructive conversation between the two of us on every aspect of this relationship," end quote. Even that modest goal appears only partially achieved. Next up, sadly, the next development is very tragic. 6 students from Northeastern University in Liaoning Province died on Wednesday, 2 days ago, after falling into an industrial flotation tank during a study visit to a mining facility in North China's Inner Mongolia. The accident occurred around 10:20 a.m. while the group was observing flotation operations at a site run by the China National Gold Group Corporation, China Gold. According to emergency officials, the students were standing on the metal grating platform when it collapsed, plunging them into the flotation cell below. Despite immediate rescue efforts, all 6 students were later confirmed dead. One accompanying teacher sustained injuries. A fellow student specializing in material processing said the students were juniors participating in a routine field internship. The student, who had previously toured the same facility, noted that the area near the flotation equipment is typically unstaffed and suggested the grating may not have been designed to hold the weight of multiple people. This raises questions like, why were the students allowed to stand on it? Why was the grating not designed to hold multiple people? Was there any supervision? The tragedy is yet another example in China of needless deaths due to easily avoidable negligence. If you want to continue to be on top of the most up-to-date analysis on China as it's released, consider subscribing. And if you're getting some value from today's episode, don't forget to hit the like button. And finally for today, more than $1 billion worth of restricted Nvidia artificial intelligence chips have been smuggled into China, according to an investigation published this week by UK-based The Financial Times that raises pressing questions about the efficiency of US export controls and the intentions of both Nvidia and US policy generally. The Financial Times report, based on dozens of sale contracts and insider accounts, details how Nvidia's most powerful processors, including the B200, H100 and H200, have found their way into the hands of Chinese data centers and AI firms despite being explicitly banned for export. The B200, used by US technology giants like OpenAI and Meta, is in particularly high demand among Chinese buyers, becoming, quote, widely available, end quote, on a flourishing black market. Chinese distributors in provinces such as Guangdong, Zhejiang, and Anhui sold restricted Nvidia chips over the past 3 months, according to the documents. These transactions began shortly after the Trump administration blocked exports of the H20, a less capable China-specific Nvidia chip, in May, only to reverse that direction earlier this month. We covered that at the time. This also suggests that reports that Chinese AI breakthroughs are being achieved despite not having access to advanced chips may not be accurate, as, unlike what was assumed previously, these AI companies are building their systems on leading American AI chips. While Nvidia insists there is, quote, no evidence of any AI chip diversion, end quote, and there is no indication the company is complicit in the smuggling, the revelations add fuel to the growing debate about the coherence of US export policy and Nvidia's role in shaping it. Critics argue that the Trump administration's recent move to allow renewed sales of the H20 undermines years of bipartisan effort to restrict China's access to cutting-edge US technology. This report of chip smuggling notwithstanding. In a strongly worded opinion piece in the US-based The New York Times, Ben Buchanan, former White House special advisor on AI under former President Biden, so we do note a potential political bias in these commentaries, warned that, quote, Nvidia's chips will give China's AI ecosystem and its government just what it needs to surpass the United States in the more critical arenas, end quote. Buchanan emphasized the national security implications, stating, quote, we should not allow American troops and intelligence officials to be targeted by Chinese AI trained on Nvidia chips, end quote. He also cautioned that the H20, though technically compliant with current export restrictions, is, quote, very capable, end quote, and, quote, performs substantially better than Huawei's best chip at inference, end quote. The former official accused Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang of exploiting policy inconsistencies, noting that, quote, Mr. Huang, who visited China to laud its AI companies just after he lobbied Mr. Trump, told a Chinese audience, I hope to get more advanced chips into China than the H20. End quote. Buchanan further warned that, quote, opening the floodgates for H20s to flow into China will revitalize Chinese companies like DeepSeek as they try to supplant US firms in the global market, end quote. The policy reversal, he said, could, quote, fracture the hard-won bipartisan consensus on the need for American AI dominance over China, end quote. With smuggling operations flourishing and geopolitical tensions escalating, the revelations raise critical questions about enforcement, corporate influence, and the future of US-China AI competition. Whether policymakers will take stronger action or allow backdoor sales to continue remains an open and consequential question. With Nvidia now the most valuable company in the world, one cannot help but be reminded of the quip often attributed to Marx or Lenin: "The last capitalist that we hang shall be the one that sold us the rope." Will there be a day where US systems are crippled by Chinese artificial intelligence built on the very chips that America sold them? Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Have a good Friday, have a restful weekend, and unless there is a major development, I will try to take the weekend off, and I will see you for a new week of developments on Monday.